This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. Today we're going to be going to the East Coast of the United States to visit with a newfound friend, Bob Yorburg. Now, I say a newfound friend, actually it was someone who I had become acquainted with by video back in the 1970s. As we start to talk about this, you'll understand when we get into it, but basically he was the originator and pioneer of doing magic on video, teaching magic, I should say, so this way that we can learn and do and be where we are today. So he was a pioneer in that industry, and I had that videotape way back when, and I had met him this past year, and whenever I did, I thought, man, we need to get together and talk. And then as we did, I found out that he had so many other interesting interests or proclivities and things that he did that it would be interesting to you as well to hear about how that he contributes back to the Magic Society. So anyhow, I want to introduce this gentleman here this week who is going to be my guest that I know you'll enjoy, get a lot out of. He's got some really good stories about Tony Slidini and about Bill Schmelk with Wellington and a lot of other things that where he has been performing and working over the years, and his Burger King as well. I should say the magic of Burger King. He was the magician. Please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Bob Yorburg, here on The Magic Word.
So
I have a guest with me who is here from a New York City area, and someone who it's interesting about how serendipity plays out. So I was just happened to be in New York City at the Houdini gravesite over Halloween this last year in 2025, and there were a few of us, about 8 or 10 of us or so, who were there gathered, and I happened to run into someone whose name sounded familiar to me, and his name is Bob Yorburg, and I said, "Are you the guy who actually did the first video of teaching magic?" And said, "Yeah, that was me." And then it kind of led to something else. It's like, oh my gosh, it was like, it was this is one of the reasons I got into magic, was because of watching his video and learning the tricks from his tape at the time. It was just so amazing. And then also the things that he's doing then right now and the rest of his life of working in carving marionettes and puppets, and also restoring old magic props and things like that. I just thought it'd be fascinating and something that you as collectors and people who are interested in history would enjoy hearing. So please welcome my guest today, Mr. Bob Yorburg. Hey there, Bob. How are you, sir?
very fine, thank you. Good to see you once again.
Yes, it was. It is good to see you there too. It's fantastic. I said it was just kind of serendipitous, I guess, that I happened to meet you. We meet different people in our lives. It seems like they cross paths, and then I guess we live long enough, we'll probably circle into about everybody.
Mhm. Yes, eventually you get to meet all of them.
That's true. Now, I mentioned about the videotapes that to begin with that you had, that was along about 1977, I want to say. Is that about right when that first had come out? Or what was that called? Bob Yorburg's World of Magic or something? Or
Yeah, what it was, there were 2 one-hour tapes done for Viacom, and they actually won awards as the best instructional tapes of the year against all categories, including Julia Child's cooking, etc. So that was quite the brouhaha, and Milton Berle presented the award, and that was an interesting experience in its own right. And there had never been any instructional video tapes on magic done prior to that, so I was the very first. And interestingly enough, Mark Wilson said to me, "I'm glad you were first." I said, "Really, why is that?" He said, "Now I can do it." So I took some heat.
yeah,
Yeah,
you were kind of the cannon fodder.
exactly. So, and I'll tell you a funny story relating to that. Right, out of Chicago, Magic Inc.
Jay Marshall.
Jay Marshall. So he wrote in the Linking Ring about these instructional videos and what a crime it was releasing magical secrets to to the general public, and then proceeded to do more instructional videos than anyone else in the world, as far as I could tell. So I went up to Jay and I said, Jay, how could you write what you wrote? And he said, did I write that? So it was like, it was really funny. And then we were buds after that. It was great.
Yeah.
But, it was a little bit of a journey. And what was really fun about the videos, and by the way, I know there are copies around, and I know the Magic Castle has some in their library. They were basically magic, basic principles as opposed to tricks that I really want people to appreciate what magic is, not just here's how you do a trick. And I think putting things in context is absolutely very important, and we can get into that more in a bit. But in the audience, for those of you who saw the tapes, you would have seen Slidini, who was a great mentor of mine. He really encouraged me to do these tapes. In fact, he did his own videotapes, which took probably 40 years to be released, but nonetheless, they did get released. And Frank Garcia was featured in some of the sessions too. We broke it up into different categories, and Frank was fabulous in terms of being, I think, a wonderful instructor. He was great live on camera, and he was also a wonderful mentor to me in terms of getting me going on cups and balls and three shell game and just lots of other things. Whereas Slidini was more, I believe, coins and cards and rope and stage and the rings and the doves and you name it, did it all with him. But I think philosophically they were both very different. And I really enjoyed Slidini's approach to how he thought about magic. And that was what made it so much fun for me.
Did you spend a lot of time with Slidini?
Yeah, we traveled to the desert seminar together every year. And then we would go to the Magic Castle after that. And so Slidini and Bill Larson were my two sponsors to be a member of the Magic Castle in LA. I was also a member of the Magic Circle in London. Various other, I was the archivist for the Society of American Magicians Parent Assembly, which was the collection in Lincoln Center. I also edited a magazine for Dick and Dorothy Brooks. And I even had my own magic school at the Biltmore Hotel, which still existed in those days, which was primarily uh, aimed towards business people to do magic in business. So that was a lot of fun as well. So it was quite a diverse experience.
Well, were I assume, fairly young whenever you first met Slidini? Did you just take the subway over to his place, or did you see an ad, or how'd you first get hooked up with him?
Well, all right. So I'll give you a little magic background. So when I was a kid, I was a member of FAME, which was the Future American Magical Entertainers, which was a magic club founded by Doc Horowitz, who taught at Yeshiva, and he was Sherry Lewis's father. And parenthetically, another story later on, I ended up doing Lamb Chop's 40th birthday, and Sherry was just such a delight. And I'll tell you
Hmm.
about that in a minute. But anyway, so as a kid, I was a member of FAME, and we met every other Saturday. An alternate Saturday was the Imps, which was David Copperfield was a member of. So I used to visit the Imps and sit in, but I never actually joined the Imps. I was very active in FAME. And FAME, every year we would do a show in the Central Park Mall. This was in the 1960s, I guess. And so we had to do our own music, which meant reel to reel tapes, and you'd cut them with a razor blade and then use a piece of tape to splice them together to
I
edit.
remember those days. Yep.
Yeah, we made our own costumes, we made our own props, and I started off making props. My first show was for my class in fourth grade, and all the props were made out of tin cans and cigar boxes and all that stuff. I got the ideas out of books and what have you. And obviously things have advanced much since then.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, you
Thankfully.
had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and so the characters who were a member of FAME were very talented and very clever. And I remember I made out of brass a coin dropper, and I brought it into Al Flosso and I said, Al, look at this. And I didn't tell him that I made it. I wanted to see what his reaction was.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, that's great. Haven't seen one of these in forever." So to this day, I have no idea whether he was kidding me or not. But It was fun. Anyway, so I used to design and build all my own magic props, and it was a lot of fun. Then I went to Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and when I graduated, I never intended to be a full-time magician, but I used to spend every Saturday at what we called the cafeteria when I was a kid.
With Harry
And
Lorraine and all
uh,
those guys.
exactly. So Tannen's closed at 3 p.m. on Saturday. We all went down to the cafeteria. Harry Lorraine was there, Kuda Bucks was there, Dunninger would show up once in a while. All the old time vaudevillians. Francis Carlyle taught me SpongeBalls. So all the greats were there, and they were telling stories and jokes and magic tricks. And if you were interested, I know David Roth and I were both like enamored with these characters
Yeah.
and learned an awful lot. It was amazing. But I never ever intended to be a full-time magician. And so when I graduated, I was visiting a friend of mine who was teaching at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and his roommate was looking at an ad, and this was in the trade papers for that would advertise auditions. And the roommate said, "Hey, Bob, here's something for you." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he go, "Well, they need a magician, someone who can act and sing and dance and work with kids and blah 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 blah." And I said, "No, no, don't be ridiculous." And they said, "Yeah, go, go." I said, "Okay, I'll go." So I went, and it turns out it was J. Walter Thompson. And had I known it was the number one ad agency in the world, I never would have gone. I would have been intimidated. But I
Yeah.
went, and to be polite, I called them to say, "Well, I won't be available if you want to call me because I'm, going away on vacation." And they said, "Oh, we've been trying to reach you." I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, you're leaving Monday for LA. You're going to be working with Mark Wilson to become the Magic Burger King." And I said, "What?"
What?
And it was when they said Mark Wilson, I immediately went over to Slidini's house and I said, "Slidini, what do I do? What do I do?" And he said, "You do it." I said, "Great, that's what I want to do." And I said, "Would you write me a letter of introduction to Mark Wilson saying, basically look after my boy?" And he
Yeah.
said, "Absolutely." So he wrote the letter. I wish I had a copy of it to this day, but I don't. And I brought it and I presented it to Mark and I said, "Hi, it's me, Blaze, blah, blah, blah." And the rest was history. I mean, we had a blast. Mark had created uh, quite a number of shows because basically you didn't want to repeat the shows. They were all advertised on TV, so we had thousands of people in the audience, and each show had to be fresh and different, and they were musical. I had to sing, you know, uh, the Magic Burger King song and all that stuff,
Right.
and
Right.
do the tricks and work with the crowds. And then we also had between shows meet and greet where I would both do sleight of hand with everybody and hand out these beautifully printed and designed magic tricks that were, people could take home and learn how to do tricks. So I think that in so many ways it really promoted magic, which was for me wonderful. The other thing about it for me personally was that it was not a non-exclusive contract, so I could do other commercials. I could do, like I did Bubble Yum. I have worked for the Mets as I don't know if you recall the Magic is Back campaign. So I was in the field as the Magic Met doing
No, I don't
illusion
remember that.
field, and I also did Yankee Stadium as the Magic Burger King. So. Which was really wild because what happens is when you've got like 60,000 people in the audience, and they're so far away, they do not allow you to talk on a microphone because it turns out it takes so long for the sound to get to you that you're hearing like a word ago when you're talking and it throws you off. And unless you're trained to do it, you can't do it. So all the shows were done to music and, live on the field, either before the games or between the games. But what was incredible, the very first time I did it, I did what Siegfried used to say to do, stand like this and wait for the applause. And I said, and Siegfried, and if they don't applaud, what do you do? I wait.
You put your arms out and wait.
I said, okay. So I do my trick and I do this, dead silence. And I'm like, what? And I'm freaking out. And all of a sudden, about a second or two later, boom, you get hit with this wall of sound from all sides, and it's like, whoa, this roar. And it's stunning, but there's such a delay that it totally throws you off.
Well,
And the only other time I had an experience like that was Bendel's was a very famous department store in Manhattan on the corner of 59th and Fifth Avenue, right across from FAO Schwartz. And Gina Davis and I were hired to do the window. And this was before she was like outrageously famous, but she was certainly a delight to work with. Um, and so we're there, and I'm doing classic 1930s, black tails, white tie, all the slights that Slidini had gone through with me, the spun, the billiard balls, the just you name it, doves, all of it, dead silence. And I'm not used to working to dead silence. Usually you get a phenomenal reaction.
Right.
And I realized, holy cow, the plate glass is so thick, you can't hear. And I'm looking at their faces and they're all going, you don't hear a
Yeah.
thing.
Big eyes, and yeah, it's like
Exactly. So,
mhm.
but it's amazing when you have experiences when you're doing magic and you don't hear the response you expect, how you internally process and move
Hmm.
on. And the one thing I can say to everyone is whatever happens on stage, keep moving forward.
That's good
Because
advice.
it's amazing what you can A, get away with, and B, how I think it improves you as a performer when you just learn to go with the flow, regardless of what happens. And I believe some of the best routines at this point are based on unexpected experiences on stage, and people give you input, and you go, "Whoa, that really works. This is great. I've got to keep this in the show." So
I remember Gene Anderson saying something like that along the way in his lecture, having to do with how that if you were performing and recording it, then later you can watch it or listen to it, and you'll think to begin with, well, that wasn't such a good show, and then you listen and say, well, it wasn't really half bad, and then you listen again, well, it was pretty good. Well, actually, I did pretty darn good. It's just
yeah,
when you're in the moment, you perceive yourself as performing or doing a little bit less than what the audience is perceiving you, how they see you,
I
so
think one of the things that drives you to get better and to always improve your show is that you're always a tad self-critical, that, oh, could have been better. I should have done this, could have done that, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah. And I think as you incorporate each of those ideas in the next show and the next show and the next show, the show really grows and improves and changes and what have you. If you say, oh, that was a great show, nothing to do, nothing to change, blah, blah,
right.
blah, I don't think you're helping yourself. So I couldn't agree with Gene more in terms of it's always nice to have a critical eye, yet you don't want to be that person when you're on stage.
Right, right. Makes perfect sense. Oh, going
Yeah.
back again to the Magic of Burger King, of course, Tony Hosini was involved with that and putting it together, I guess. And
Yeah.
had you already worked with Tony before? So it seems surprising. You called them and had said, hey, we've been trying to get back in touch with you because we're
Well,
going to put you together with Mark. So had you already
yeah.
auditioned for this, or had you talked with Tony
No,
about
no, no,
it?
no,
Or
no, no. Mark was the one who kicked off, Mark Wilson, sorry, kicked off the entire program, including the personal appearances, the stadiums, actually being flown in on a helicopter, on fire trucks, on just anything that created the buzz. Tony basically came into it later with a very different approach, and I worked with both. So,
okay,
but as I was the very first Burger King, Magic Burger King, to appear personally. So
hmm.
that was a treat. It was a real delight. Later on, the program expanded, and they ended up hiring other folks as well.
You were not the one that were doing the television commercials, I assume.
No, they actually, believe it or not, there were three different kings, if you will. Like depending upon when you're cutting in and out, what you're seeing. So I did some work, but Fred Barton was the basically the most of the close-ups were Fred. Some of the other stunt work were other people. You know.
Hmm.
So it really, what you see is kind of a seamless, hi, I'm the Magic Burger King. What goes into creating that, probably nowadays with digital and AI and everything else, none of that would be necessary, but there was just a lot of behind the scenes work that had to happen to create a seamless, 60-second commercial, which was
And,
Kind of
and I
cool.
want to go back, and also I'd mentioned about Slidini, about how you had first met him, because you had said you went back to him to say, hey, can you write to Mark Wilson to recommend me? But how did you develop that relationship? How did you first meet Tony? Or did
Right.
somebody say he's giving lessons, or
So I
did you?
guess when I was very young, Larry Weeks had these conventions, uh, none other than the Larry Weeks conventions, and they were probably plus or minus every 3 or 4 months. And he would have dealers, he would have shows, whatever. Slidini was one of the performers. This was obviously a lot of years ago, and they had live bands, and it was very vaudeville come to life. And I was really impressed with Slidini. And at one point, I believe he was at the cafeteria, and I said, I would like to study with you. And he said, okay, call me. So, I called him, and he said, call me next week. So I called him. He said, call me next week,
Okay.
because that's how Slidini was. And I called him, and he said, okay, you call me next week. So I called him. And then eventually he said, okay, you come over for a lesson. So I came over for a lesson. And he said, what do you do? So I showed him what I did. And I thought I was pretty hot at sleight of hand. You name it, I did it. And I did it well. And he said, you throw it all away.
Okay.
I said, all right. He says, now you can learn my way. And the deal is you had to learn exactly his way. He would allow you to make changes, but not until you had the timing perfect and his way. And once the timing was spot on, and his timing I thought was better than anyone's,
Hmm.
uh, then you could go and have fun with it and play with it and change it. And then he and I would sit and talk about how to make things, how to make changes, how to make it grow, how to make it different, how to make it my own. And that was where the fun began. Eventually, we got to the point where these sessions would go to 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and we just couldn't stop talking about how to do this, how to do that, blah, blah, blah. And he would actually uh, take like a really silly kid's trick and fool me with it because his timing was so impeccable. And probably he caught me off guard because I figured, oh, I know this. This is silly. This is stupid. I can't believe he's showing this to me. And all of a sudden, boom, he'd come up with something really fun. And I got to tell you something about Slidini's timing, which was really a blast. It wasn't just magic; it was life. And what made it really fun was one night we're at the Magic Castle and we're standing by the bar. And Slidini, this is before the internet, mind you, so where you can look up just about anything. And Slidini, in all of his books, had photographs, black and white photographs from when he was probably 40 or so years younger. So I'm not positive that everyone knew what Slidini looked like. And we're standing and we're chatting, and Slidini looks at this kid standing around the bar and says, oh, what's all the excitement? And the kid goes, what are you talking about? He says, well, there seems to be like a lot going on tonight. You know what? And the kid looks at him and says, Slidini is here. And Slidini looks at him and says, eh, is he any good? And the kid starts explaining what Slidini does, what makes him so great. And the crowd's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, any other magician would have just walked up and said, let me show you a card trick.
Yeah.
Slidini's building the tip. He's getting a crowd that's huge. And all of a sudden, the kid realizes he's talking to Slidini.
Wow, what a story.
And then Slidini proceeds to do magic for him, not the crowd, but for him and make him the star.
Yeah.
And the kid's beaming. And it was brilliant. The timing was impeccable. I mean, there's no better way to build a crowd, to get the kid look like a hero and a star, to get everyone like mesmerized and just focused on Slidini and his. Then of course he did the one coin routine, but standing, which takes an awful lot of nerve. And he did some cards and so, and just all kinds of things. And then he brought the house down, and it was just spontaneous. But it was such a wonderful way of not saying, "Hi, I'm a magician. Let me show you a trick."
Right. 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 Wow,
You
what a
know,
fun
but
story.
so as I say, his philosophy of life was, I thought, just delightful and really, he was a true gentleman. He was a real, you know, he was so respectful and so wonderful. And then, as we became buds, like he'd invite Cavett over to do magic. And Cavett, it turns out, was a very credible magician. And
Nick Cavett.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, I had no clue. I figured, he just was fascinated with magic. And then Tony said, well, show him some tricks. And Cavett says, what? He said, show him the 6 coins, and he did it perfectly. It was like insane. So, he, I think, had spectacular influence on a lot of people in terms of getting them excited about magic and really good at it, because it wasn't like collecting 50,000 trick decks and trick this and trick that. It was using anything and everything that was like, a packet of sweet and low or a cigarette or a card or a
Right.
coin. None of it was, if you will, bogus. It was all just talent and timing. And that was, to me, pure magic, you know.
Well, going to what you were saying there, as far as being important to learn something, I guess, that lasts a lifetime. Going back again to the videos, those are things that we have in our zeitgeist now of using videos and then digital downloads. I mean, there were DVDs and then now digital downloads. Who knows what's
Mhm.
going to be then in the next generation? But in doing that, I still think that, at least to my recollection, that your video still holds up today in my mind of thinking it was better produced than some of the YouTube videos that I've seen today. So it looked like that you had spent a lot of time or in a production studio with the right lighting and the cameras and everything then like that too. So I could tell that you had some experience certainly of being behind the camera or in the studio, that you knew what you were doing and putting this together, as well as, of course, the performing chops to teach the right things so that they weren't too far advanced and they weren't just way too simple, you
Well,
know.
so a few things. First of all, yes, it was in a proper television studio, and they had several cameras, and they also had a phenomenal production team. Viacom only hired the best. And also we worked for months on the scripts and on the content and everything else. So the production value, I thought, far outshined all of these people just sitting in front of a camera saying, hi, I'm going to teach you how to second deal. This is really going to be boring, but I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it. Drone, 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 drone.
Right.
It was like a live show, even though it was a teaching video. And I think keeping that level of interest and excitement and whatever. And the other thing is, as I mentioned originally, it wasn't just, here's how you do a trick. These were kind of philosophies and approaches to magic that I believe transcended, here's the trick. And I absolutely, one of the things that really makes me happy, and I see very seldom, is people doing magic. I see people doing a lot of tricks, like here, here, I'm going to fool you. Oh, here, this. Oh, look, see, this happened, or better yet, see, I found your card. And it's like there's no reaction. You didn't just do magic.
Right.
Slidini would do a coin trick and burst out laughing like he'd never seen it before in his life, and he's done it 10,000 times.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a true element of surprise.
Hmm.
And if
Hmm.
you don't have that element of surprise, that element of magic, or put it in context in terms of where magic has come from and how it's evolved. And I believe all of that should be in your mind when you're performing so that it has relevance, it has excitement, it has impact, it has all the things that it has to have. And I way too often see people doing tricks. Just
That's
just
true.
trick
I
play.
think there needs to be an element of surprise and also a freshness. So it seems like this is something that you're just seeing for the first time as well.
Yeah, not like I'm bored. I've done this in front of the mirror 50,000
Yeah,
times.
I'm just going to mail this in. Yeah.
Yeah. And and that to me is very sad when I see people who are just spectacularly talented who in effect don't sell it. Uh,
Hmm.
and don't, and possibly it seems like they don't even enjoy it. They're just doing it.
That's on close up and stage. You can name some stage performers who do the same thing. I mean, there are some people who do card tricks over and over and over, and they just don't have, they've lost their excitement, their freshness, their surprise, and the same thing on stage. People just seem to be walking through it and handing the blades to their assistant and really not going
Yeah.
through the motions to make it exciting.
Yeah. And I think, going back to, I hate to harp on it, but why not? I think if you put it in context that it's magic, you're really
Hmm.
doing magic, then that element of excitement can't leave because it's not a trick anymore. It's not just I'm doing something clever.
Yeah.
I'm clever than you. If you say it's magic, then I think what happens is the element of surprise, the element of excitement, the element of fun, all of those elements re-enter the equation and they can't disappear. And
Hmm.
I think with that, then it becomes fun for the audience. And that to me is huge, you know.
Do you feel as if that, I mean, personally, that you were a pioneer in this industry? I think
Uh,
you are.
yes, both that and I also unfortunately took an awful lot of heat for
Because people
being
thought
that
you were
type.
probably exposing magic to the general public, basically, right?
Yeah. So, the long and short of it is I've always loved what I do. I love magic. I love sharing it. And if I had to do over, I would do it again. But I would not recommend being the pioneer to other people
Hmm.
because it's a tough road to hoe. I made friends, I made enemies, and I think everyone's sort of moved past that. But I really also believe that I opened the magic door to an awful lot of people in a really fun way. And I had people who I believe had no interest in magic prior to seeing the videos who went, whoa, this is so much fun. This is great. I'm
Right.
going to do this. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very happy about
Yeah.
that.
As
Yeah.
well, you should be. Well, again, then you moved on. I want to move into the carving that you have been doing. So this is
Yeah.
really what you've been doing for the last, what, 20, 30 years? Is actually,
Well, both. I'm doing, first of all, I guess as a kid, I don't know why, I was always fascinated with antique magic, and I just every time I would do a show, I'd put the money back into buying not a new trick, but an antique trick that I could hopefully bring back to life and make work or perform or what have you. I never collected just to collect. I only collected if I thought I could get value out of it and actually use it or perform with it or whatever. In so doing, I ended up restoring an awful lot of magic props and learning a lot of skills that included woodworking, metalworking, carving, you name it. I did it all. And then it kind of snowballed. When I was the Magic Burger King, there was a fellow who would come to these enormous festivals with an organ from a carousel, a beautiful carved organ on a trailer. And I fell in love with it because it was a sight and a sound to behold. And I one day said to him, boy, I'd love to build one of those. And he said, you can't. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, nobody builds them anymore. So I went home and I ordered every book I could find on building organs, voicing pipes, and carving facades, and designing, and 100 other aspects, all of which pertained. And I basically filled a room with books, read every one of them, and decided I'm going to do this.
when someone
And
tells you no, you think, yes, I can do it.
yeah, so that was it. So basically, as I was performing around the country, we did a lot of like, 3 to 5 day sales meetings around the country. And obviously they were magic themes, so they were a lot of fun. And then at the end of the 5 days, you were like a marshmallow. You could hardly move because you were working on 2 hours of sleep and all that fun stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so I would stay instead of coming straight home. I would stay and I'd look up carvers in the different cities around the country, and I found some of the finest carvers who ever roamed the planet. And I asked each and every one of them, can I spend a few days with you and study with you and learn how to do what you do? And they all said yes. So as I was traveling doing magic, I was also, honing the other skills. the restoration and building skills and designing skills. And ultimately became the president of the Carousel Organ Association of America, and as such, have collected all kinds of organs from carousels and crank organs, those hand cranked organs and various other things, and built and restored any and all of them. So that work has been featured on magazine covers around the world, and it's been a real joyride, and not unlike the Magic Burger King experience, all of it unexpected. I just did it because I wanted to do it, and everyone clamored and said, "This is amazing," So, I'm doing both. I'm carving, I'm magicking, I'm doing all of it, and I guess the end of the day is, if I can put a smile on someone's face and make sure that they're happy and having fun and enjoying what they're doing, seeing and hearing, whatever, I'm a happy camper. And part two, I will say, if you do what you enjoy doing more than anything else on the planet, then you're 100 times ahead of the game. If you're, going to work every day just because you have to go to work and you hate what you're doing, then, you need to make a change. And one of the things that I learned early on, when I was doing an awful lot of black tie fundraisers, doing, sleight of hand strolling, people would say, "Oh, you love what you're doing. I wish I did." And, or they'd say, "Oh, you're a magician. Make my wife disappear." And I'd lift my lapel and I'd show them a little button that says, "No, I can't make your wife disappear." Like they were the first person ever to have thought of
Right.
that.
Right.
And my point is, I was both shocked and appalled by how many people would say to me, "I hate my job. I hate my wife. I hate my life. I hate my this, my that, whatever. And it's so nice that you enjoy what you do." And I'm thinking, if you love what you do, you're not working ever. It's just, you're living your dream. You're living your passion. And I've somehow managed to combine my passions and make a living, I guess, having fun, or
Yeah. And
certainly
spreading joy.
spreading
Yeah.
fun, spreading joy, exactly. And to me, it feels like a gift. It feels like, wow, this is amazing that I can actually, if you will, get away with this.
Now you're saying you're carving carousels, which are the pipe organ kind of organ
Yeah.
grinder things, but also you carve marionettes.
Well, I've carved Punch and Judy puppets in theaters. I've carved organs and facades and carousel horses, and just all kinds of things. I've done an awful lot of architectural work, like I've done churches, restoration and what have you. I was the only carver allowed in Christchurch in Greenwich, Connecticut since 1937 to do all the restoration in there, and that was just a treat, because there's just so much that's been carved, and it just, through so many years, there was a lot of, I don't want to say neglect, because I'm positive they worked very hard to keep everything up, but things fall apart over time,
Yeah.
and pieces go missing, and then you have to replicate them, and trying to figure out how it was done. It's kind of like reverse engineering a jigsaw puzzle.
Pretty
So
challenging.
yeah, it's really fun. For me, it's fun. And
Yeah.
so, that being said, I've also enjoyed, I have to say, Bill Schmelk's been a friend of mine for probably 50 years or so. And we've done an awful lot of work together in the shop, and Wellington Enterprises. And so it's always fun, working together and collaborating with other people, and it, I get a kick out of it. And it just, the idea of not just, here's a trick, but here's an effect, here's an idea, here's where we want to end up. How do we get there? That's the journey is very exciting for me,
Didn't
because,
Bill retire recently and sold off all of his stuff?
well, yes and no. Uh, the big shop he closed. He's open. He still has a smaller shop that he's working out of. And it's, in terms of the large scale illusions, he's not doing those anymore. But in terms of all of the really cool things that he invents and produces and creates, he's still working on those, and coming up with new effects. So for example, he's got one of the things that will be out shortly is he's got a stratospheres where the tube isn't a full ball higher than this than it
Right.
should be.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's very clever. And so he's working on some classics in Magic, but totally rethinking them and redesigning them, which I think is a blast. So, and mechanically we compare notes in terms of how does this get accomplished. And it's fun. It's fun to watch everything unfold. Right now we're working on a piece it's a classic, and there's probably 10 different ways to hinge it. So sure enough, we ordered 10 different hinges. We're trying each and every one of them to make sure the solution's the best. But I guess we're both a little obsessive. And so it's really fun to work with someone who's equally as, talented and dedicated to getting the best answer. So that's
Does he
fun.
live out in the East Coast?
He's in New Jersey.
New
Yeah.
Jersey. Okay. For some reason, I thought he was on the West Coast. Okay.
No, no. Actually, as a kid, he worked with John Gahn on the
Yeah.
West Coast, and then came east and basically became the only illusion builder in the East. Hence, when Henning was on Broadway and Blackstone Jr. was opening his show on Broadway and all kinds of other films and activities were happening, he was designing and building all of those props. Even Copperfield for his specials when they were filmed in New York.
Hmm.
He did a lot of those pieces. So, it's really a delight to work with someone who's that dedicated as well. And it's just fun. So, it's also, I think it's fun to cross paths because we often do dinners, the Magi, and compare notes. And that's really fun. So, you know, I don't know if that goes on in other cities, the way it used to. My suspicion, unfortunately, is I think a lot of stuff's going on online. And my gut feeling is you lose a lot of the up close and personal effect of learning from one another and sharing ideas with one another. I'm not saying you can't, but I think it's different. You know what I'm
I do
saying?
know what you're saying, but do you think that you contributed to that by starting with some videos? In other words, rather than being one-on-one, hands-on hands, that it's a video kind of a thing
Well,
across the screen?
I think, yeah, I absolutely believe that magic on television is not the same as magic in your hand or right in front of your nose. I'm not saying there's not a place for it, because absolutely there's a place for it, and it's really fun to watch and really spectacular on TV. But when you see it up close and personal or live on stage, I think it's an entirely different experience. Now, does that mean that they're mutually exclusive? Not at all. I think they're very different experiences, and there should be room for both. I think the good news is I believe there's more traveling shows than ever before, and I think that's great. I think it's good for magic. I think it's good for uh, getting them drawn into the whole experience. I will say that I'm sometimes a bit disappointed in the production value when you put a card table on stage and a camera on a big screen. That to me is not a show. It's not a stage show. It's nice in terms of sharing a wonderful, incredible sleight of hand, but it's not the same as watching what used to be these elaborate stage shows that are unfortunately few and far between now. You
Do you
know.
have a preference of what you like better than the other? I mean, do you like stage better than close-up or vice versa?
Yes. Right now, I like stage a lot better because I like the repartee and the audience interaction and the spontaneity. Because in my mind, there's no two shows alike. When you're doing close up, um, there is some variability, but it's pretty much very straightforward, and to me, not as exciting in terms of when you're someone on stage, you don't know what they're going to do or say or how they're going to react and whatever, and running with that for me is very exciting and very challenging. And I just get such a kick out of it. So I've sort of somehow gravitated towards stage. And although, mind you, I cut my chops on close-up sleight of hand. Well, that's not
Right.
true. I also did stadiums. I did, all kinds of stage. I did everything. But, uh, I think I honestly am not doing illusions anymore. I think that's for a younger performer to do it justice and keep it credible.
Right.
Um, but and I will of course do slow sleight of hand close up either strolling or a performance. But stage is really speaking to me the loudest right now. You know.
So do you ever consider yourself as being a creator or more of a builder?
Um, I think building is a means to an end, so I would absolutely prefer saying creator because a lot of times I would think of, ooh, wouldn't this be fun? And try to figure out a way to make it work. And I designed and built some stuff and I showed him the bill and he said, no, I wouldn't build that. Too involved. You know, uh, we had a very funny thing when I was a kid. We would all work on rising cards. And you could do it with a thread, of course, or you could do it with gears and wind up things and batteries and this and that in 10 different ways. But it's really fun to find all the different ways of doing things and kind of comparing them and then figuring out which one's going to be the most reliable. And the thing that like there's certain things I will never do on stage because I don't think they're 100%. And I know there's always outs and there's always all kinds of other things, but I will stay away from them specifically because I think it has to be like a real pow, and that's it. And there's no second guessing on that one. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so philosophically, I think it has to be magic. I think if you're creating your own means to an end, you have a sense of ownership that I think reads as you're performing it. And it's fun. It's for me very exciting, you know.
Now, I know we're recording this using Zoom, and for those people who are watching, can see behind you this carousel, or not a carousel, I guess it's just an organ, is it? Or
Yeah, carousel organ.
carousel organ, yeah. So could you explain what that is? And that's not one, I guess, that you had necessarily carved, is it? Or
No,
no?
no. It's one that I saw and kind of fell in love with and said, "Ooh, I want to do that." I've obviously carved an awful lot of carousel organ facades. Some are on my website, some aren't. But nonetheless, the organ behind me is called either a band organ in the United States or a fairground organ in Europe. Um, and the reason it's called a band organ in the United States is it emulates a marching band. So it's got snare drum and bass drum and cymbals and glockenspiel and pipes and pipes that emulate everything from trombones to trumpets to you name it, and they're all voiced differently, and they create this entire marching band sound. In the US, they associate it typically with carousels, merry-go-rounds. And, that's where you'll see them, that's where you'll hear them. But historically, they were much more diverse. Like the reason they're called fairground organ in Europe is that they were seen on live fairs and they would attract a crowd to many different types of rides. And then often earlier on, probably early 1900s, they would front what they called a bioscope show. A bioscope show basically was a carved facade that surrounded an area in the middle and the inside, and that would travel from town to town, and they'd have an organ out front and a stage in front of the organ. And they'd have an outside talker or a barker who would attract a crowd. They'd often have dancers that would dance to the organ and attract a crowd. And by the time the crowd was big enough, they'd then invite them in and they each pay admission to go in. And the bioscope show was a moving picture show. This
Hmm.
is prior to movie houses and a lot of the vaudeville houses being converted to movie theaters. So these were traveling shows, and the idea of seeing an image moving was spectacular, and people would pay money to see it. And these weren't like feature films. These were um, just showing you the fact that it was possible, showing the technology. They would also often have slide shows where there were glass slides and you'd pass one slide in front of the other and it would create an image as if it was a moving image. So you would fly to the moon. You would, experience perhaps, a great adventure like a flood, Johnstown flood, or any of the other things. And they'd reenact historic significant events, and you'd pay your money and you'd go and you'd see it, and that was the entertainment. Nonetheless, the organs were always fronting these shows and attracting the crowd, and that's how that worked. So they have historical significance well beyond the merry-go-round, and they were certainly very much a part of our historical entertainment industry.
What it sounds like is almost that was at that time modern day AI from the standpoint that put people out of business. Because as you said, there could be like a whole band playing right there. There could be like a 15-piece band that's playing right there that you don't have to pay anybody. You just kind of wind the thing up and it starts playing.
Right.
Much like again, you're not paying actors or whoever else to
Oh,
do use their intellectual property.
if you look at the great amusement parks in Coney Island, Steeplechase, Dreamland, and Luna Park, they
Right.
had these huge dance pavilions. The dance pavilions had a balcony at either end. One end would be a live band, and the other end would be the organ. When
Hmm.
the band was on break, they'd play the organ so people could continue to dance because typically the perimeter was all tables where they would dine, and then you'd watch the dancers dancing. And and as such, you didn't want downtime. So yes, indeed, they would replace the band often. Obviously, roller rinks had band organs that would just play, before recorded sound, etc. And you could be skating all night to an organ and playing live, either ice skating or roller skating. Um, and in Europe, they had what they called dance organs, and dance organs, unlike band organs, had accordions and hi-hats and
Hmm.
all kinds of other saxophones built in, all of which played, and they would keep it in the cafe playing all evening. And once again, the tables where you dined or drank would be surrounding the dance floor, and people would dine and dance all night long, and the establishment owner didn't have to pay for a band. So yes, indeed, it was very early AI. And the other thing about it, which was wonderful, a lot of them were paper rolls with holes punched in them, or cardboard
Hmm.
books with holes punched in them. And it was the forerunner of the IBM punch card, the forerunner of the computer.
Huh.
So,
I hadn't thought of it that way. That's true. Hmm.
everything is born out of this technology, I believe, or at least technology is continuous, and it evolves. So yeah, there's a lot of tradition there that's, I think, very exciting, and I think the idea of putting your performance, your magic, everything in context historically is very exciting. And I guess that's probably what attracted me to being the archivist of the Society of American Magicians, that I was just uh, gung-ho about reading everything I could about the history of magic and where it came from, uh, all the greats and all the wonderful, exciting tricks. And the fact that some of it was just so plain clever. They would
Hmm.
take, like one of the things that really that I got a kick out of was in Mellini's book, the ping pong ball. And he cut it in half, put a cockroach in it, glue it back together, put it in his pocket. And when he bounced it, the roach would wake up, and then the ball would start moving around the table, you know. And it's just taking like silly technology which existed then and running with it,
Yeah.
So I think now you do it with a magnet.
Yeah.
But in those days, you approach things a bit differently, and I'm really excited to put things in context, as you know, and just see where it came from, how it evolved, and I think it makes it fun. I think it makes it even more relevant, when you're up there doing whatever. I did a trick for the local SAM recently, and everyone went, "Oh, that's amazing." And I said, "Yeah, it was published in 1946 and blah, blah, blah book."
What's old is new again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, it all comes full circle.
Well, I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing and keeping these older things new again by
Mhm.
continuing to update them and refurbish them and everything. And also, thanks for your part in history and keeping us, getting us involved in all this way back when. It's to where we are today. It's just amazing. So thank you for your time.
Did I
The name of my podcast is called The Magic Word. So I'd like to know, so what is your word? What is it that's important to you?
Oh gosh. Um, my word, I guess, is surprise.
Okay.
Remember the element of surprise, and please never forget that you're performing magic.
That's what we're doing. Exactly right.
Yeah.
That's right. Keep that element of surprise. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time and your words and your friendship. This has been great.
I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you again in person.
Indeed. So, with the Magic
Thank you.
Word Podcast, that was Bob Yorburg. This is Scotty out. Thank you very much, Bob, for being my guest this week on the Magic Word Podcast. This has been fantastic. I enjoy getting a chance to actually become very well acquainted with someone who I did not know very well before. And I hope that you listeners got a lot out of this then as well. And it's always good to make a new friend. And I have one here in Bob Yorburg. So thank you, Bob, again for joining us. And also, I want to mention if you want to check out his website at bobsmagic.com. Also, the other one he has, which is the, let's see, bobyorberg.com. One is for his magic and one is for his carving. So it's worth going to take a look at both of those websites. So go and check those out if you will. So until next week, stay well, get books, and remember to keep that element of surprise. Surprise your audiences. This is Scotty out.